So we've already done our skin prep, and we're going to finish off with a bit of balm over the lip just so the lips are nice and supple and soft by the time we apply the lip products right at the end of our makeup. So as we can see, this beautiful model has lovely even skin, and she's got lovely freckles, and I love freckles. They're my favorite thing ever. So I'm going to show you how to create a really beautiful skin with freckles. So what I'm doing right now is just applying a cream highlighter over the high planes of the face. It's sort of a golden silver tone that really reflects the way in which light would bounce off our skin naturally. So just amping that up with a little bit of that highlighter. I tend to put that over the cheekbone, bridge of the nose, center of the forehead, just as I am right now. Now I love freckles, so there's definitely no way I'm covering them up completely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting the foundation in the areas where I want to get some coverage and even a little bit more evenness in the tone. So what I'm doing is I'm using a duo fiber brush, I believe it's from MAC, and I'm applying the Studio Tech foundation in NC45. My lovely model's been away, so she's got a tan. So I'm just going to apply that around the mouth first, because as I said, with women of color, that tends to be the place in which you're more certain to get a bit of unevenness in tone. So what I'm doing is I'm pressing it on. This is the application stage. Don't worry too much about blending just yet, because we're going to go ahead and sort that out later. But I'm just making sure that I've packed on the product everywhere I need some coverage. In applying foundation in this area of the face, it's really important that you don't just look at the face, but you also look at the neck. A common mistake that I've made in the past is matching the product to the face, not just the other parts of the face, but just to, you know, match the overall complexion, and completely forgetting that obviously your face is attached to your neck, which is attached to the rest of your body, and just having that sort of light face, dark body thing. So sometimes you're going to find yourself having to go with a color that's entirely different from what's on the face for the sake of having that more uniform tone that goes from the head into the neck and chest area. So yeah, just wanted to point that little tip out. Don't just look at the face. Sometimes take a step back, look at the general complexion of the person, and then go ahead and assess what kind of tones you want to match to. So I'm using that same foundation, the Studio Tech in the NC45, and I'm applying that in the center of the forehead. The highlight and the hairline area is a little bit deeper and has a bit more of an orangey tinge to it. So I'm not going to apply it there, because then it's going to have that sort of white ghosty cast over her complexion. I'm just going to apply it in the center. And what I'm doing is I'm going in between applying with a brush and blending with a sponge. I really love this technique. I've really enjoyed how the sponge really presses the product into the skin and doesn't just leave it with the excess oils. I love dewy skin. I love a bit of sheen as a finish, but I find that the sponge blending it in just gives it a bit more control. So I'm going to go ahead and carry on with the same foundation shade on the jawline. The jawline doesn't really have that many freckles, so I don't mind adding the coverage there for an even tone. So as you would have noticed, I'm really missing out the center of the face, which has got most of the freckles, because I don't want to cover that area up. So just as I did around the mouth, I'm going around the jawline, applying with the brush, and then blending out with the sponge. Now this sponge is a different one from what I usually use, which is the Alcone sponge. This one's a lot thinner and a bit softer, so it is taking me a little bit longer than usual to really blend the product out, because of course I'm working in smaller spaces. But yeah, use any sponge that's most suitable to you. So as you can see right now, we've got coverage around the lower half of the mouth and the center of the forehead. Now it's time to blend out the forehead area and give everything a bit more of a seamless, gradual fade. So what I'm doing right now is just taking a sponge, same sponge I've used to apply the rest of the foundation, and just really blending over the outer edge of where I've applied on the forehead. It's really blending that is the key to that professional red carpet finished skin. It's very rarely about exactly what products you're using and what tools, and just really about you taking that extra time to blend. So what I've done is, you'll notice I've applied a deeper color along the hairline, and also you can see just under the cheekbone where I've got a deeper color there. I've still got the Studio Tech. I believe that shade is the NC50. So it's a lot deeper than the foundation shade. It's got more of a nutmeggy tone to it. And this is going to act as a natural bronzing. I love to bronze and shade with cream products before I do it with a powder, just because I feel like it gives a much more natural, realistic feel to the skin. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just using that same wedge sponge, just a different side of the wedge. And I'm really pushing that product in. And I'm not taking too much care over it overlapping. I don't mind it overlapping over the foundation areas, because I do want it to blend in well. It's going to go over the areas that I've used the cream highlighter on also, just so that that sheen can shine through that bronzing shading color as well. So don't worry about things touching each other or kind of going over the spaces. That's absolutely fine. You're trying to make one base after all. So that's cool. A recommendation for this type of technique in which you're using foundation to cover and bronze would be the BBU palette by Bobbi Brown. That's an excellent thing to have if you want to have everything in front of you and you don't want to buy thousands of different foundations for each section. You'll have, all your shades there, probably more than you need, but it's great just to have that there, just so you can have that foundation routine that allows you to shade, cover, and highlight all at once. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is correct. I'm using an orange undertone corrector from Elegant Pro, I believe. And what I'm doing is I'm just applying that underneath the eye, but I'm applying quite a little bit. It does seem strong because it's a really rich orange for her complexion, but I'm actually using a very little amount of product. And what I'm doing is I'm correcting the brown tone underneath the eye before I put the concealer on. And the reason why I've done that is because for how little concealer I want to use, it's important that I lift that dull, deeper shade underneath her eye before I correct it with a brighter color. I'm not actually putting much foundation in the center of her face, so it's really important that I really correct that area so that it doesn't contrast her natural complexion too much. So you can do this with your finger. I mean, it is a small area of the face, so it's fine to do with your pinky finger or whatever feels more comfortable. You can do it with a brush. If you've got a pointed beauty blender, you can apply it that way. I like going from the finger into the skin because it means that I don't waste product, because no sponge or brush is going to be soaking that up for me to waste it. So I'm pressing it in, really blending it, making sure that it's not just sitting on the surface. Your under eye is really, really thin in terms of the skin, so you really want to do what you can in blending it. And then straight over that, I apply the concealer. I believe I've got the shade Caramel and Custard mixed underneath the eye. And that custard is actually really, really bright for her complexion, but because I've mixed it with the caramel, which is close to her skin color, it evens out a little bit. So that's Caramel and Custard from Nars, which is the Radiant Creamy Concealer. I really love that concealer, whether I'm going for someone, whether I'm doing it on someone that's oily, whether I'm working on someone that's dry. I think it's just a beautiful finish and formula to use underneath the eye area. It does the job, it conceals and corrects without you having to use a whole heap of product. Now with this, be sure to use more concealer than corrector, because what will happen is if the balance between the corrector and the concealer is not quite there, you will get a salmony color. So, you know, if you've got too much corrector and not enough concealer, it's still going to have that orange tinge to it. So even though you're using that orange to cancel out the brown underneath the eye, just make sure that your concealer is a little bit more in terms of how much product you're using, just so that it really cancels out any of the orange underneath it. Yeah. Right, so now that I've covered the under eye enough, I'm going to go ahead and set it. And what I use is the Laura Mercier original loose powder, and I'm just going to use my Yachio brush. This is my favorite brush to use to set the under eye. I just feel like that pointed edge and the size of it really just allows you to wedge right into the inner underbit of the eye that's closest to the nose, and just like really sweep under without having to cover basically the whole face or the center of the face. So I'm using that to press into the skin to set the concealer itself, and then after, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of excess over the under eye area, just so that any kind of eyeshadow that I apply won't ruin the look, because I can just swipe it off after. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some bronzing. I'm using the CoverGirl bronzer, and I'm going to start along the hairline. I always start in this area because that's the place where the sun hits you and tans you before anywhere else. So I'm using a Morphe brush, a very soft brush with lots of sparse hairs, and I'm going to really just apply that along the hairline, blend it right through before I take it underneath the cheekbone. Now at this stage, what I'm doing is bronzing as opposed to sculpting, so I'm not going to be too harsh with my application. I'm going to move my brush in quite wide strokes across the cheekbone, because I really want it to blend into the highlight, into the cheek area. It's just a very soft bronze look as opposed to something that's more sculpted and structured. I like to put a bit of bronzer over the centre of the nose, just because it gives that holiday look. You know, when some people come back from holiday and like their forehead's really tan, and then they've got a little bit of like a bronze, reddish bronze on their nose. I don't know, I just like it. It's holiday vibes to me. So sometimes I do that. Okay, so now I can see the overall, you know, idea of skin direction. I actually want to put a little bit more glow in the skin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a golden undertone highlighter with a more silvery undertone highlighter, and I'm going to layer over the cheekbone as I did before, and then like not powdered areas, just to get that more light reflecting highlight. So I'm going to take that a little bit over the cheek as well. I really love when the cheek or underneath the blush reflects light. I feel like that's really, really flattering. It takes your eyes towards the high planes without it being like too harsh and sort of striking in just the cheek area. So I'm taking it right from the cheekbone down into the apple of the cheek. And as you can see, it's really building up, but it's still giving it more of a reflective, dewy glow as opposed to a glittery glow. So I really love to do that. Again, use the same brush you used before, something really soft, something with less hair so it's not so dense in application. And yeah, I'm popping that over the bridge of the nose. I like to do the little nose highlight. So I'm using two highlighters here. They're both from MAC. One of them is the Mineralize Skin Finish highlighter in Soft and Gentle, and the other one is the Extra Dimension Skin Finish in Oh Darling. So now we're going to go ahead and add our cheek color. Love a bit of blush just to add a bit of pop into the complexion. I'm actually using something that is from La Femme Beauty. They used to have really, really cheap blushes that were refill sizes. Amazing. I've had them in my kit for a really long time. Now, of course, this section is optional. I just wanted to show you how I prep the skin totally. So this is what I would generally do. Well, I started doing it lately before applying my eyeshadow. This is part of this sort of complexion prep, shall we say, to, you know, get ready for eyeshadow. So what I'm doing is I'm using a face setting powder that's a bit lighter than the model's skin, and what I'm doing is I'm pressing it across the brow bone. So instead of doing that concealer vibe, I've started using a pressed powder to bring that highlight area underneath the brow bone. So using something like a small compact brush that is straight on the top is still going to give you that definition. So just really press that on. Like, don't be afraid to layer it because it's going to last a lot longer. Just layer it and get that same highlighted effect without it being shiny. My thing with concealer is, of course, it's got a shine to it. So if you're not looking to have that kind of finish underneath the brow bone, that's a good option. What I then do is I use the same setting powder, but in a deeper shade this time, to carve out the crease. Not really carve it out because we're not doing a cut crease per se, but I use a really fluffy brush to blend in between the brow bone and the lid. And I find that doing this first allows all my eyeshadows to blend so beautifully. If you're doing something like a smoky eye and you struggle to get the edges really nice and soft blended, pop a bit of a face powder in between the crease and you'll find those shadows just blend so beautifully. So that's what I'm doing there. That's sort of my prep. I mean, realistically, you could pop on a bit of mascara, a bit of gloss and be going. That could be the look. But this I would count as my prep. So that brings us to the end of my freckled face complexion routine. I hope this is really helpful, especially because I haven't seen much on freckled face women of colour. So try this out and I'd love to see what you do. Thank you for watching.